I've always kind of hypothesized, is that down to the fact that co-working and the open plan co-working spaces traditionally would have been, targeted or created by freelancers, startups, the kind of entrepreneurial kind of ecosystem type of character. And then we've always had shared our serviced offices, right? And in post-COVID, given the advantages of flexible contracts and, look, there's a lot of people now working from home, and there's a lot of, I suppose, office buildings now tailoring how they operate. Are we seeing, is flex offices and flex work, is that just the smashing together of co-working and serviced offices? Would that be a fair hypothesis in a sense?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's now getting so competitive that everybody is designing their own niches. And with competitive fields, it forces people to evolve. But yeah, I would agree with you. There is a clash there between the two. And I also think that the ones to dominate in the early days, everybody knows sort of the name that's associated with serviced office spaces, WeWork, and that's the way that they created those environments, which was less so on the office space, but more so on the community and the places for people to meet and people to connect. But there's some great diversity now in terms of these different operations that are out there. We've got an operator in Manchester, which is in a few different locations across the UK that you might be familiar with, called Gilbanks. And they're quite on the contrary to that co-working side. There's no beers and pizza events. It's for professional services. They target the legal firms, private equity houses, banks, etc. And they've done really well off the back of that in terms of having a niche. And I think that's what will happen in terms of the field, in terms of the co-working. There might be certain clashes, but I think the industry will continue to evolve.
Yeah. I think you're spot on. I think it's vitally. We always talk about how important it is to know who your customer is, but I think on the flip, it's also incredibly important to know who your customers definitely are not, and stay away from those, because it needs to be win-win. And if it's a win-lose, and you think, I'll get this guy's in for 6 months or whatever it is, you'll end up falling on your face. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really important to understand what you stand for and what you don't stand for in your space, and crafting that niche, crafting that proposition. And it's so hard because at the end of the day, you've got businesses to run, and sometimes you want to get the capital in, and the opportunities might not be so fluid. And we had an instance in Manchester as a point to that. And to be fair, this operation in Manchester turned down hundreds of thousands, if not £1 million worth of business over the course of 6 to 12 months, because they had created a district that was purely for tech businesses, and they allowed a certain amount of professional services businesses to come in. So, for example, 1 or 2 recruitment firms, etc. So when that demand was fulfilled, if any more recruitment businesses were to come into that building, they'd turn away. And it just so happens that after around 12 months of resilience, it was showing that a lot of the recruitment firms were underpinning the market, and they just had to sort of go for those opportunities. And now the market shifted again, and they're looking at different occupiers. But it is really difficult at the time, because if you look at all these operations that targeted the TMT sector, the tech, the media, the telecoms firms, they did so when that sector was absolutely thriving at the time, and things change and move, so you have to be able to adapt and be flexible. It's really hard to go in and be super niche, for example, and say we represent and attract fintech occupiers, because that market isn't massive, especially not in the regions. So yeah, massively agree with you on that. You do have to sort of set your parameters of who you want in there. And you have to be mindful that you don't have a bad apple in the space. But sometimes it can be really hard when there's not a plethora of opportunities about.
Thanks for tuning in to Flex That Worx. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next episode. Connect with us on LinkedIn, watch the full episode on YouTube, and you can explore free tools and resources over at baseworks.co. This is Flex That Worx, powered by Baseworks, here to help you scale your workspace, making it simpler and less stressful.